Service entrance is on the side.
Sir, I'm here for the executive floor.
I said service entrance.
I'm not a staff.
Are you deaf or just stupid? I don't care.
Bruno stepped forward, lip curling.
Filthy flies aren't allowed in here. You stink up the place.
A glossy black limo pulled up. The CEO stepped out and turned to his security guard.
I told you to keep the lobby immaculate. I am cleaning, sir. It's just these foul, clueless flies that keep swarming in here.
The two men laughed. The CEO poured his coffee onto the floor at her feet.
Here, it's for you, free. And not a single stinking black fly is allowed to set foot in my building.
She said nothing. She walked toward the elevator lobby. What she did next would leave every one of them stunned. 3 hours earlier, a red-eye flight from London touched down at JFK Gate 14B. The cabin lights flickered on, and passengers stirred, reaching for overhead bins, checking phones. But the woman in seat 2A hadn't slept. She had spent the entire flight reading one document. 46 pages, every clause, every footnote, every signature line. Blair Edwards closed the folder and slid it back into her laptop bag. The acquisition was done. Meridian Capital, her private equity firm, had closed on Halverson Tower at exactly 8 a.m. Eastern. $1.2 billion. Signed, filed, recorded with the county clerk before most of Manhattan had finished its first coffee. She could have sent her team. She could have called ahead, arranged a car with tinted windows, walked in with lawyers on both sides and a press release already drafted. That was what people expected. That was what people in her position always did. Blair didn't want that. She wanted to see the building the way it actually was, not the version they polished for investors. Not the rehearsed smiles and straightened ties. She wanted to walk through the front door looking like nobody and find out how her new company treated a nobody. So she kept the wool coat she had worn on the plane. No jewelry, no heels, just the coat, a pair of flat shoes, and the laptop bag with one document inside that would change everything about the next 12 hours. The cab dropped her at the corner of 53rd and Lexington at 8:30. Morning rush. Suits streamed past in both directions, briefcases swinging, coffee cups raised like shields against the cold. Nobody looked at her twice. Halverson Tower rose 42 stories above the street, all glass and brushed steel. The name was etched into the granite above the revolving doors in letters 3 feet tall. Halverson. Blair looked up at it. She almost smiled. Inside, the lobby was everything she expected and nothing she wanted. Italian marble stretched from wall to wall, polished to a mirror finish. A chandelier the size of a small car hung from the ceiling, throwing soft gold light across the reception desk. Corporate portraits lined the east wall. 12 former board chairs, 12 white men in dark suits, 12 sets of eyes that all looked the same, not a single face of color among them. The security desk sat 15 feet from the entrance. 2 guards, 1 metal detector, and behind it, a man named Bruno Callahan, who had worked this lobby for 15 years and believed, truly believed, that he could tell who belonged in this building just by looking at them. Bruno was 6'2", ex-military, with a crew cut gone silver at the temples. He kept his uniform pressed sharp enough to cut paper. He knew every executive by first name, held the elevator for board members, called their wives ma'am. He was proud of this building. He considered himself its first line of defense. And in 15 years, not once had he questioned whether his instincts about who belonged and who didn't might be built on something uglier than experience. At the reception desk sat Denise Calloway, 26, hired 8 months ago. She had noticed things since her first week. The way security moved faster when certain people walked in. The way maintenance staff were routed through side corridors so executives never had to see them. The way the break room on the 3rd floor had an unwritten rule about who sat where. Denise never said anything. She needed the job. Her mother's medical bills arrived every month like clockwork, and this position paid 3 times what she had made answering phones at the clinic downtown. So she kept her eyes on her screen, her voice pleasant, and her opinions locked behind her teeth. This morning, she watched Blair walk through the revolving doors and immediately felt the shift. Bruno straightened. His hand moved to his radio. His chin lifted the way it always did when someone came in who didn't match his mental picture of executive floor material. Denise's stomach tightened. She had seen this routine before. She knew exactly what was about to happen. Blair crossed the marble floor, her flat shoes making almost no sound. She passed the chandelier, past the portraits of 12 white men, past the reception desk where Denise sat frozen with her fingers hovering above the keyboard. She walked straight toward the elevator bank. And that was when Bruno stepped in front of her. Bruno planted himself directly in her path. Feet apart, shoulders squared, one hand resting on the radio clipped to his belt. He was a full head taller than her, and he used every inch of it. Service entrance is on the side. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The lobby's marble walls carried sound the way a cathedral carried hymns. Every word reached every corner. Blair stopped. She looked up at him the way someone looks at a door that should be open but isn't. "Sir, I'm here for the executive floor." Bruno's jaw tightened. A small vein pulsed at his temple. He leaned forward, not much, just enough to close the distance between authority and threat. "I said service entrance. Are you deaf or just stupid?" The question echoed off the marble and died somewhere near the chandelier. A woman at the coffee kiosk looked up from her latte. A man in a pinstripe suit slowed his walk toward the east elevator, briefcase frozen mid-swing. Near the reception desk, a courier clutching a stack of envelopes pretended to check his phone, but his eyes never left the scene. The lobby was beginning to tilt, the way a room tilts when everyone inside it knows something is about to happen. Two other security guards drifted closer from their posts near the west corridor. They flanked Bruno on either side, not quite touching Blair, but close enough that she could feel the heat coming off their bodies. Three uniformed men forming a wall between one woman and an elevator she had every right to use. One of them cracked his knuckles. The sound was small and sharp, like a warning shot. Blair's voice stayed level. "I'm not staff. I don't care." Bruno stepped forward again. This time, his lip curled, and the professionalism he wore like a uniform fell away completely. What came out of his mouth was not protocol. It was not procedure. It was something he had been carrying inside for a long time, something that lived in the marrow of him, and it came out now because he believed, completely, that there would be no consequences. "Filthy flies aren't allowed in here. You stink up the place." The words hit the marble and bounced. The woman at the coffee kiosk put her hand over her mouth. The man in pinstripes stopped walking entirely. A young intern near the potted ficus tree looked down at her own shoes, face burning red, unwilling to watch but unable to leave. Denise, behind the reception desk, closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. When she opened them, her hands were shaking. A security camera above the west corridor blinked its red light. Steady, unblinking, recording. Nobody said a word. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody asked Bruno to repeat himself, because nobody needed to. They had all heard it, every syllable, and every one of them, every man in a suit, every woman with a badge, every guard in a uniform, made the same choice in the same moment. They chose silence. They chose the safe side. They chose the side with the name on the building. Blair didn't flinch. She stood exactly where she was, her weight evenly distributed, her breathing steady. The laptop bag hung from her right shoulder. Her left hand hung at her side, fingers relaxed. Nothing about her posture suggested retreat. Nothing about it suggested fear either. This was the part that would bother Bruno later, much later, when he was sitting in a room he didn't want to be sitting in, answering questions he didn't want to answer. She hadn't looked afraid, not once, and he hadn't noticed because he was too busy enjoying the sound of his own voice. The revolving doors spun. Cold morning air swirled through the lobby, carrying exhaust fumes and the distant blare of a taxi horn. And then came the car. A glossy black limousine, long as a funeral procession, slid to a stop at the curb. The driver stepped out first, jogging around to open the rear door. Out came a pair of Italian leather shoes, then pressed gray trousers, then a cashmere overcoat that cost more than Bruno's annual salary. The driver held the door and bowed slightly. The gesture was practiced, automatic, the kind of reverence that comes from years of serving someone who expects it. Richard Halverson, CEO, the name on the building. Halverson was 61, silver-haired, and carried himself the way men carry themselves when they have never once been told no by someone who mattered. He walked through the revolving doors holding a ceramic travel mug, custom-made, his initials in gold on the side, and surveyed his lobby the way a rancher surveys a fence line. His eyes found the scene immediately. Bruno, the two backup guards, and between them, a black woman in a wool coat who clearly did not belong. Halverson didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't ask whether there had been a misunderstanding. He looked at Bruno and spoke loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "I told you to keep the lobby immaculate." It wasn't a question. It was a performance. He said it while looking at Blair the way someone looks at a stain on white carpet. Bruno straightened, his chest puffed. The approval of the man whose name was on the building washed over him like sunlight. "I am cleaning, sir. It's just these foul, clueless flies that keep swarming in here." Halverson laughed. Not a chuckle, not a polite exhale through the nose. A real laugh, deep and loose, the kind that comes from genuine amusement. Bruno laughed with him. The two backup guards smiled. Someone near the elevator bank let out a nervous giggle that died as quickly as it came. The lobby had become an audience, and the show was just getting started. Pamela Sinclair appeared from the East Corridor. Floor manager, third year at the company, blonde hair pinned tight, heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the marble like a metronome counting down. She read the room in 2 seconds flat and chose her side without hesitation. "What's the holdup?" She looked at Blair the way someone looks at a piece of furniture that has been delivered to the wrong address. "Honey, if you want a job, you should apply to the kitchen." More laughter, louder this time. The lobby was feeding on itself now, each insult giving permission for the next, each laugh making the next one easier. The intern near the ficus tree turned away completely, her shoulders hunched, but she didn't speak. Nobody spoke. Speaking would mean choosing, and choosing had a cost that none of them were willing to pay. Blair stood in the center of it all. The laughter echoed off the marble, off the chandelier, off the 12 portraits of 12 white men who stared down from the east wall like a jury that had already reached its verdict. She said nothing. Her face revealed nothing, but her right hand moved, slowly, almost imperceptibly, and her fingers tightened around the strap of her laptop bag. Denise saw it. From behind her desk, 20 feet away, she saw that small movement and understood it instantly. That bag held something, and whatever it was, this woman was not going to leave without using it. Halverson took a long sip from his travel mug. Then he looked directly at Blair, eye to eye, and he smiled, the kind of smile that isn't a smile at all, the kind that says, "I can do anything I want to you, and there is nothing you can do about it." "You know what?" he said. "Here, it's on me." He turned his mug upside down. Coffee poured onto the marble floor, hot, dark, steaming. It splashed across her shoes, speckled the hem of her coat, pooled around her feet in a spreading brown stain. The ceramic mug clattered against the stone. The sound rang through the lobby like a gunshot. 43 people watched. Not one of them moved. Halverson leaned in close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, the cologne on his collar, the entitlement that radiated off him like heat from asphalt. "It's for you, free of charge." His voice dropped to something between a whisper and a growl. "And not a single stinking black fly is allowed to set foot in my building." The words hung in the air. Heavy, toxic, permanent. Several phones were already recording. One woman near the kiosk had been live streaming since Bruno's first insult. The red light on her phone blinked steadily, capturing everything. The coffee on the floor, the stain on Blair's shoes, the smile on Halverson's face, the silence of 43 people who watched and did nothing. Blair looked down at the puddle at her feet. She looked at the coffee on her shoes. She looked at the splatter on her coat, the same coat she had worn on a red-eye from London, the same coat she had worn while signing a document worth $1.2 billion. Then she looked up at Richard Halverson. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't pull out a phone to call the police or a lawyer or anyone at all. She stepped over the puddle, calmly, quietly, the way you step over something that is beneath you, and she walked toward the elevator lobby. Behind her, Bruno called out, "Hey, where do you think you're going?" She didn't turn around. Halverson snapped his fingers at the backup guards. "Stop her." She didn't slow down. Her flat shoes left faint coffee prints on the marble as she walked. Brown half-moons, evenly spaced, steady as a heartbeat. Each one a mark on a floor that would never be the same again. The two backup guards moved fast. They cut in front of Blair before she reached the elevator bank, blocking the brushed steel doors with their bodies. Arms crossed, feet planted. The taller one, name tag read Perry, put his hand up, palm out, like he was directing traffic. "Ma'am, you need to leave the building." Blair stopped. She was surrounded now. Bruno behind her, Perry and the second guard in front. Halverson 10 feet to her left, watching the whole thing with his arms folded and his chin tilted at the angle of a man enjoying a show he paid for. Pamela stood beside him, phone in hand, already typing something, probably an email to HR. Probably a report about a disturbance in the lobby caused by an unauthorized individual. The language would be clean. The intent would not. "Sir," Blair said, turning back toward Halverson. Her voice carried no tremor, no pitch change, nothing that would give any of them the satisfaction of knowing they had reached her. "I have a scheduled meeting on the executive floor. If you contact your office, they will confirm." Halverson didn't move. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't glance at Pamela or ask Denise to check the system. He stood exactly where he was and looked at Blair the way a man looks at something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "A meeting," he repeated. The word came out slow, coated in disbelief and something worse. "You have a meeting on my executive floor." He turned to Bruno. "Did you hear that? She has a meeting." Bruno snorted. "Yeah, and I've got dinner reservations at the White House." Laughter again, smaller this time, but sharper. The kind of laughter that isn't about humor at all. It's about power. It's about showing someone exactly where they stand by laughing at the idea that they could stand anywhere else. Pamela leaned toward the nearest bystander, a middle-aged man in a charcoal suit clutching a Starbucks cup, and stage whispered loud enough for Blair to hear. "This is what happens when you don't have proper security protocols. They just wander in off the street." She said "they" the way some people say a word when they mean a different word entirely. The man nodded. Quick, automatic. The nod of someone who wants to agree with the person holding power and get to his office without incident. Halverson took 3 slow steps toward Blair. His Italian shoes clicked on the marble, crisp, deliberate, each step a statement. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough to tower over her, close enough to make the size difference feel like a verdict. "Let me explain something to you," he said, "because clearly nobody has." He gestured at the lobby, the marble, the chandelier, the portraits, the elevator bank with its polished doors reflecting the scene like a mirror. "This building is worth $800 million. The companies inside it manage portfolios worth $60 billion. The people who walk through this lobby every morning wear watches that cost more than your entire life." He paused. Let the numbers hang in the air like smoke. "And you walk in here in a coat that smells like an airplane seat, carrying a bag from some discount store, and you tell my security you have a meeting on the executive floor?" He leaned in closer. His voice dropped. "Do you even know what happens on the executive floor? Do you know what those people do? They move markets. They shape policy. They decide which companies live and which companies die." He looked her up and down, slowly, deliberately, the way someone examines something before throwing it away. "And you think you belong up there? You, a woman who can't even get past the front desk." The intern near the ficus tree had turned her back to the scene entirely. Her shoulders were trembling. She was crying, silently, the way people cry when they know no one will help if they make a sound. Blair held Halverson's gaze. She didn't step back. She didn't look away. Her breathing stayed even, measured, the kind of breathing that comes from discipline, not from calm. The kind of breathing that says, I am choosing not to react, not, I have nothing to say. I belong where I say I belong, she said. Quiet, simple, final. The words landed like a stone in still water. The lobby rippled. Halverson's smile disappeared. For the first time since he had stepped out of his limousine, something crossed his face that wasn't arrogance. It was brief, a flicker, a shadow, and then it was gone, replaced by something harder, something meaner. Bruno, he said, without looking away from Blair, escort this woman out. If she resists, call the police and have her arrested for trespassing. With pleasure, sir. Bruno moved forward. He reached for Blair's arm, not gently, not the way you guide someone toward a door, but the way you grab something you intend to remove. His fingers closed around her elbow, hard, the kind of grip that leaves fingerprint bruises. Blair looked down at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. Take your hand off me. 4 words, no volume, no aggression, but something in the way she said them made Bruno's grip loosen, just slightly, just for a fraction of a second, before he caught himself and squeezed tighter. You don't give me orders, he said. But his voice had changed. Something in it had shifted, the way a dog's bark shifts when it suddenly isn't sure whether the thing it's barking at is prey or predator. I said take your hand off me. Same tone, same volume, same absolute, unshakable certainty. Perry stepped closer from behind. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we will physically remove. You will what? Blair turned her head just enough to look at him. Put your hands on a woman in a lobby full of cameras? In front of 43 witnesses? With at least 3 phones recording right now? Perry's eyes darted to the left. The woman at the kiosk, the intern near the ficus, the man in pinstripes who had his phone held low at his waist, screen tilted toward the scene. Perry's hand dropped to his side. Bruno still held her arm, but his confidence was leaking out of him now, slow and steady, like air from a tire with a nail in it. Halverson stepped in again. He was done being amused. The performance was over. What remained was raw, undiluted authority, or what he believed was authority. Enough games. He jabbed a finger toward the revolving doors. Get out of my building, now, before I make sure you never set foot in any building in this city again. I know people. I know judges. I know police commissioners. I know exactly what happens to people like you when they don't know their place. People like you. The phrase landed on the marble and shattered into 1,000 pieces. Every person in that lobby heard it. Every person understood exactly what it meant. And every person made, once again, the same silent calculation, the same cowardly arithmetic of risk and reward, and chose to say nothing. Except Denise. Behind the reception desk, Denise Calloway's fingers had stopped shaking. They were still now, perfectly still. She was looking at Blair with an expression that no one in the lobby would notice but Blair herself. An expression that said, I see you, and I'm sorry, and please don't let them win. Blair saw it. A glance that lasted less than a second. 2 women, one standing in a puddle of dried coffee, one trapped behind a desk she couldn't afford to leave, recognizing each other across 20 feet of marble and a lifetime of shared experience. Then Blair gently pulled her arm free from Bruno's grip. He let go, not because he chose to, but because his fingers simply opened, overridden by something his body understood before his brain did. She straightened her coat. She adjusted the strap of her laptop bag, and she turned, not toward the revolving doors, not toward the service entrance, not toward any of the exits that these men had been pointing her toward for the last 15 minutes. She turned toward the elevator, and she pressed the button. The ding echoed through the lobby like a bell at the start of a round nobody saw coming. What are you doing? Halverson's voice cracked for the first time. Not with fear, not yet. With the disorientation of a man who has given an order and watched it be ignored. I said get out. Blair didn't look at him. She watched the floor numbers descend above the elevator doors. 34, 33, 32. Bruno, I said stop her. Bruno reached for her again. This time she sidestepped, one small step, fluid, almost casual, and his hand closed on air. 21, 20, 19. Pamela's voice came from across the lobby, sharp and shrill. "Somebody call the police! She's trespassing!" 12. 11. 10. Blair opened her laptop bag. The zipper sound cut through the noise like a blade through silk. She reached inside and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Gold seal, blue binder, the kind of document that doesn't come from a discount store. The elevator doors opened. Blair stepped inside. She turned to face the lobby. 43 faces stared back at her, some angry, some confused, some afraid, and one, just one, behind a reception desk that was holding its breath. She held up the document, and she smiled. "Actually, sir," Blair's voice was calm, conversational, the kind of tone someone uses when they are about to correct a small misunderstanding, except this wasn't small, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, you don't." Halverson blinked. "I don't what?" "Own this building." The lobby went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against eardrums, that makes people forget to breathe. Blair held up the document, gold seal catching the light from the chandelier, blue binder crisp and official. Every letter printed in the clean, unforgiving typeface that the county clerk's office uses for documents that change ownership of things worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. "My private equity firm, Meridian Capital, closed on this tower 40 minutes ago. Signed, filed, recorded." She let each word land separately, the way a judge reads a verdict. $1.2 billion. The transaction cleared before your driver picked you up this morning. Halverson's face went through 3 stages in 4 seconds. Confusion, denial, and then something that wasn't quite fear but lived in the same neighborhood. The sudden, nauseating realization that the ground beneath your feet is not where you thought it was. His hand, the same hand that had poured coffee at her feet, began to tremble. A thin line of sweat appeared along his hairline. His ceramic travel mug, the one with his gold initials, slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Coffee splashed across his Italian suit, his own coffee, on his own shoes. The symmetry was perfect, and no one in that lobby missed it. That's not possible," he stammered. "I would have been notified. My board would have." "Your board approved the sale 6 weeks ago, Mr. Halverson. Unanimous vote. You would have known if you had attended the meeting instead of sending your assistant." The color drained from his face the way water drains from a cracked glass. Fast, irreversible, and impossible to stop. Blair stepped out of the elevator. She didn't rush. She walked the way someone walks through a building they own. Because she did. "My name is Blair Edwards, managing partner, Meridian Capital." She paused in front of Bruno, who was still standing where she had left him, his hand frozen in mid-reach, his mouth half open, his radio crackling softly against a hip he had forgotten existed. "The new owner of the building you're standing in." Bruno's arm dropped to his side like a puppet whose strings had been cut. His jaw worked silently, opening, closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. His face had gone from red to white so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug behind his eyes. Blair turned to Halverson. "I just watched my new head of security scream a racial slur at me." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And I watched the outgoing CEO pour coffee at my feet and call me a fly." Outgoing. The word hit Halverson like a physical blow. His knees buckled. Just slightly. Just enough that Perry noticed and instinctively reached out to steady him before catching himself and pulling his hand back. Nobody wanted to be seen touching Halverson right now. Nobody wanted to be associated with the man who had just poured coffee on the person who signed his paychecks. "We can negotiate," Halverson said. His voice had lost every trace of the authority it carried 5 minutes ago. It was thin now, reedy. The voice of a man who has just discovered that the throne he was sitting on belongs to someone else. There must be some arrangement. I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" Blair said. "That I was the owner? Or that pouring coffee on a stranger and calling her a fly was wrong?" She paused, letting the question breathe. "Because one of those things you should have known regardless." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Pamela Sinclair had gone the color of old paper. Her phone hung at her side, forgotten. The email she had been drafting about an unauthorized individual glowed on the screen. A document that would, within 72 hours, become Exhibit C in a wrongful conduct investigation. Her lower lip trembled. She looked toward the east corridor the way a trapped animal looks toward a gap in the fence. Blair looked at Pamela. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Pamela took one step backward, then another. Then she turned and walked toward the corridor, her heels clicking faster now. The sound of retreat, sharp and unmistakable on the marble that had carried every insult she had spoken 10 minutes earlier. The lobby was perfectly still. 43 people stood frozen in a tableau that would be replayed millions of times before the week was over. The woman at the kiosk had her hand over her mouth. The man in pinstripes had lowered his phone but hadn't stopped recording. The courier near the reception desk stood motionless, envelopes still clutched against his chest, staring. The intern near the ficus tree had turned back around, tears still wet on her cheeks, watching with an expression that was equal parts shock and something fiercer, something that looked like hope. Denise Calloway, behind the reception desk, exhaled for what felt like the first time in 20 minutes. Her eyes were wet, her hands were steady, and on her face was the smallest, quietest smile that anyone in that lobby had ever earned. Blair Edwards turned toward the elevator. She stepped inside, and this time, nobody tried to stop her. The elevator doors closed with a soft hiss. Blair pressed the button for the 42nd floor, the top floor, her floor. The ride took 41 seconds. She counted every one of them, not because she was nervous. She counted them because she wanted to remember the hum of the cables, the faint vibration under her feet, the coffee stains still drying on her coat. She wanted to remember what it felt like to rise above people who had tried to push her down. When the doors opened, the executive floor stretched before her. Glass walls, mahogany desks, a conference room with a view of Central Park. 3 assistants looked up from their screens. A young man in a vest and tie stood so fast his chair rolled into the wall. "Ms. Edwards, we weren't expecting you until—" "I need 3 things," Blair said. "A full employee roster, security logs from the last 2 hours, and your head of legal on the phone in 5 minutes." He was already dialing before she finished the sentence. Blair set her bag on the conference table and took off her coat. The coat that still smelled like airplane seats and Halverson's coffee. She draped it over the back of a chair and looked out the window. 42 stories below, a black limousine sat at the curb. Its driver stood waiting for a passenger who would not be riding in it again. Her phone buzzed. A text from her chief counsel. 3 words. "Footage is secured." Down in the lobby, the aftermath was already unfolding. Bruno stood at his desk, staring at the envelope Blair had left behind. His fingers trembled as he peeled it open. Meridian capital letterhead. His name at the top. 2 paragraphs. The second one contained the phrase, "effective immediately." He read it 3 times. Then he set his radio on the desk, unclipped his badge, and placed both beside the envelope. His hands were shaking so badly that the badge skidded across the polished surface and fell on the floor. He didn't pick it up. Perry and the second guard watched from 10 feet away. Neither spoke. Neither offered to help. The mathematics of loyalty had shifted, and they were already recalculating. Halverson was still standing near the coffee stain on the marble, near the shattered pieces of his ceramic mug. His phone was pressed against his ear. He had called Gerald Whitmore, his personal attorney, 3 times in 4 minutes. The third call connected. "Gerald, she can't just—" "Richard," Gerald's voice was flat, tired, the voice of a man who had already seen the live stream. "I watched the video. My paralegal sent it 6 minutes ago. It already has 200,000 views. I don't care about the video. My contract." "Your contract has a morals clause. Section 14, paragraph 3. Discriminatory conduct. Grounds for immediate termination without severance." A pause, long enough to hear him breathing. "You poured coffee on a woman and called her a fly. On camera, in front of 43 witnesses. I can't defend this, Richard. I won't defend this." The line went dead. Halverson lowered his phone. He looked around the lobby, at the marble he had once claimed to own tile by tile, at the chandelier he had commissioned, at the portraits of 12 white men who now seemed to be looking away from him instead of at him. Pamela Sinclair never made it back to her office. 2 HR representatives intercepted her in the East Corridor with a suspension notice. They escorted her to her desk, watched her collect her purse and phone charger, and walked her to the service entrance. The service entrance. The same door she had told Blair to use 30 minutes ago. Denise watched it all from behind her desk. She watched Bruno leave through the revolving doors for the last time, his badge left behind on the counter like a piece of a life he no longer had access to. She watched Halverson shuffle toward the elevator, flanked by 2 new security officers Blair had called from a sister property. Men who didn't know him, who didn't hold doors for him, who called him sir with the kind of professional courtesy that means absolutely nothing. He had 20 minutes to pack his office. Blair had been generous. Denise looked up at the ceiling. Somewhere 42 floors above her, a woman who had been called a fly was sitting in a conference room, rewriting the rules of every floor below. For the first time in 8 months, Denise Calloway felt like she could breathe in this building. The live stream hit the internet like a match dropped in gasoline. The woman at the coffee kiosk, the one who had been recording since Bruno's first insult, uploaded her video to Twitter at 9:14 a.m. By noon, it had 4 million views. By 6 p.m., 12 million. By midnight, the number had stopped mattering because the video was everywhere, reposted, screen recorded, stitched, quoted, and shared across every platform that existed. The hashtag came first, #JusticeForBlair. It trended nationally within 3 hours. Then came a second one, #NotAFly. That one went global. CNN ran the footage at noon with a split screen, the coffee pouring on the left, Halverson's face on the right. NBC led their evening broadcast with it. Local stations from New York to Los Angeles played the clip on loop, cutting between Bruno's sneer, Pamela's kitchen comment, and the moment Halverson turned his mug upside down. A media analyst on MSNBC called it the most damning 45 seconds of corporate racism caught on camera this decade. The sound of the ceramic hitting the marble became the most replayed 3 seconds in America that week. The internet did what the internet does. It identified everyone. Bruno Callahan, 15 years of service, ex-military, 2 commendations from the building management company. His service record was posted online by a former colleague before lunch. By dinner, his landlord had received 400 emails. His ex-wife gave an interview to a local news affiliate in which she said, without hesitation, "I'm not surprised. That man treated everyone beneath him like garbage. He just never got caught on camera before." Pamela Sinclair, floor manager, 3 years at the company. Her LinkedIn profile was archived before she could delete it. Screenshots of her employee reviews surfaced. 2 separate complaints from women of color on her floor, both filed in the last 18 months, both marked resolved with no action taken. A former intern posted a thread about the time Pamela told her to smile more and talk less during a presentation. The thread got 60,000 likes in 4 hours. Richard Halverson, CEO, the name on the building. His biography on the company website was taken down by noon, but cached copies spread faster than the takedown. Business journalists who had profiled him as a visionary leader scrambled to rewrite their stories. A photograph from a 2019 company gala resurfaced. Halverson standing in front of the lobby portraits, all 12 white faces behind him, champagne glass raised, grinning. The photo became a meme. It was not a kind one, but the real damage came from inside. Blair's legal team moved fast. Within 48 hours, Meridian Capital launched a full internal investigation. They brought in Coleman and Associates, an outside firm specializing in workplace discrimination, and gave them unrestricted access to every email, every HR file, every security log, and every complaint filed in the building over the past 5 years. What they found was not a single incident. It was a system. 14 formal complaints of racial discrimination had been filed in the previous 3 years. Every single one had been routed through Halverson's office. Every single one had been closed with the same notation: insufficient evidence, no further action required. The complainants, maintenance workers, janitorial staff, mailroom employees, one junior accountant, had all been reassigned, demoted, or quietly let go within 6 months of filing. The pattern was undeniable. The documentation was meticulous. And now, with the video as a catalyst, every one of those former employees had a reason to come forward, and a public that was ready to listen. They came forward in waves. A maintenance worker named Thomas Reed told reporters about the time he was written up for using the main restroom on the 14th floor instead of the basement facilities designated for support staff. A mailroom clerk named Angela Foster described being told by Pamela Sinclair that she should use the freight elevator because executives don't want to share their space with your kind. A junior accountant named Victor Hayes recounted the morning Halverson walked past his desk and told a colleague, loud enough for the entire floor to hear, "I didn't know we were hiring from the shelter now." Each story was worse than the last. Each one painted the same picture: a building that looked like glass and steel from the outside, but was built on something rotten underneath. The lawsuits came next. 6 former employees filed civil suits against Halverson personally and against the management company. The charges included racial discrimination, hostile work environment, wrongful termination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The combined damages sought exceeded $22 million. Bruno faced his own reckoning. The coffee pouring incident, though performed by Halverson, implicated Bruno as a co-conspirator who had initiated the confrontation. His verbal assault was classified as aggravated harassment under New York law. The racial slurs elevated it from a misdemeanor to a hate crime enhancement. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office filed charges within a week. Bruno's attorney requested a plea deal. The DA declined. "This case is going to trial," the DA told reporters on the courthouse steps. "The public deserves to see accountability, not a backroom handshake." The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution played the lobby footage 4 times, once in full, once with audio isolated to Bruno's voice, once freeze-framed on the coffee hitting the marble, and once synced to a timeline that showed exactly how many seconds elapsed between Blair's first polite request and Halverson's final slur. The jury watched in silence. 2 jurors wiped their eyes during the testimony of Angela Foster, who broke down on the stand, describing the day she was escorted out through the freight elevator after filing her complaint. They deliberated for 90 minutes. Halverson was found liable on all civil counts. The jury awarded $14.6 million in damages, split among the 6 plaintiffs. He was barred from holding a CEO or board position at any publicly traded company for 10 years. His name was removed from the building before the verdict was even read. Bruno was convicted of aggravated harassment with a hate crime enhancement, sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory completion of a racial sensitivity program. His security license was permanently revoked. Pamela Sinclair was terminated with cause. Her severance was denied. 3 of the 6 civil suits named her as a co-defendant. She settled out of court for an undisclosed amount that her attorney later described, off the record, as significant enough to change her life, and not in the way she planned. The building that had once carried Halverson's name in 3-foot letters above the revolving doors was under new management now. And the new owner had made one thing clear from the moment she sat down in the 42nd floor conference room, with coffee still drying on her coat. This building would never operate the same way again. 6 months later, the building on the corner of 53rd and Lexington looked the same from the outside. Same glass, same brushed steel, same 42 stories rising above the Manhattan skyline. But the name above the revolving doors had changed. Edwards Tower. The letters were the same size, 3 feet tall, etched into granite, but they meant something different now. They meant that the woman who had walked through those doors in a wrinkled coat, with coffee on her shoes, had not come to make a point. She had come to make a change. The 12 portraits on the east wall were gone. In their place hung a new collection, 24 photographs selected by employees from every floor. Maintenance workers, accountants, security staff, executives. Men and women of every background, every color, every story. The faces on that wall now looked like the city outside the windows. The break room on the third floor no longer had unwritten rules about who sat where. The freight elevator was no longer an unofficial route for employees who didn't fit. The side corridors that had hidden certain workers from executive eyes were reopened and redesigned into collaborative spaces with glass walls and natural light. Blair had rebuilt the company from the inside out. Mandatory diversity training for every employee, from the mailroom to the boardroom. A blind hiring program that stripped names, photos, and addresses from every application. An anonymous reporting system routed to an independent outside firm, not to an executive who could bury complaints in a filing cabinet. She created the Edwards Foundation, $10 million of her own money, scholarships for women of color pursuing careers in finance, real estate, and corporate leadership. In its first 6 months, it awarded 42 scholarships, one for every floor of the building. The number was not a coincidence. Thomas Reed, the maintenance worker written up for using the 14th floor restroom, was rehired and promoted to facility supervisor. On his first day back, he used whatever restroom he wanted. Nobody said a word. Angela Foster, the mailroom clerk told to use the freight elevator, came back as an administrative coordinator on the 28th floor. She took the main elevator every morning. She pressed the button herself. Victor Hayes, the junior accountant Halverson had compared to a shelter resident, was offered his old position with full back pay. He declined. He didn't want Halverson's money. Blair gave him something better. A role in Meridian Capital's portfolio division, with a salary that made his old position look like an internship. And Denise Calloway. Denise, who had sat behind that reception desk for 8 months with her opinions locked behind her teeth. Denise, who had watched and said nothing because she couldn't afford to lose a job that paid for her mother's medical bills. Denise, who had looked across 20 feet of marble and sent a silent message to a stranger standing in a puddle of coffee. Blair promoted her to office manager. New title, new salary. The kind of salary that meant her mother's bills would never keep her silent again. On the morning the new name was unveiled, Denise stood in the lobby. Same marble, same chandelier, same elevator bank. But the air felt different. The light felt different. Or maybe it was just that the footsteps belonged to different kinds of people now, walking with a different kind of confidence. Blair gave one interview. A journalist from the New York Times asked why she had walked in alone that morning. No security. No lawyers, no announcement. She said, "I didn't buy this building for revenge. I bought it because every person who walks through a door deserves to be judged by what they carry in their mind, not by the color of their skin. Doors should open for talent, not for melanin." The journalist asked if she had a message for people who had experienced what she went through. Blair smiled, the same quiet smile Denise had seen in the lobby, the same one that changed everything. "Walk in anyway," she said, "and bring your documentation." What would you have done if you were standing in that lobby? Tell me in the comments. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Stories like this are far from over. Yo, build your own door room. Don't waste energy begging people to let you in their building, 'cause the best revenge ain't proving them wrong. It's making sure the next person who looks like you never has to fight to walk through that lobby.